Hello everyone.
Hey guys.
We are finally back in our hometown of Roanoke, Virginia. This is another Travel Therapy Mentor live video, normally on Sunday night, this week on Monday night. We were out of town last night, surprise, surprise, or we seem to always be out of town. So we're finally back in Roanoke for the next 5 weeks. This will be the longest we've spent here in a row in a very long time. So we're actually really excited to have a break from traveling, as weird as that sounds, because to most people our whole life seems like a vacation. So but it does get tiring, so taking a break from the break is going to be nice. Tonight we're going to be talking about making a full-time therapist salary working only half the year. This is an article I wrote originally probably about 2 years ago now, and it was one of my most popular articles ever, probably because the title's pretty catchy, and most people are interested in that. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we have been able to structure our lives in order to do that, how that would work as a travel therapist, and what the pay numbers would actually look like, and if this is something that maybe you guys would be interested in emulating potentially down the line. So Whitney's going to introduce us. I'm going to get this video shared in a couple groups, hopefully get some more people in here, and then we'll jump into the topic.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. So a lot of you guys probably already know us, but some of you guys may be new and you may not know us. So I'd like to give some introductions and a little background on our story. So my name is Whitney Aiken.
And I'm Jared Kazaza.
And we are both traveling doctors of physical therapy, and we've been traveling for a little over 4 years now. And we both started traveling as new grads, which is a question that we get quite often because a lot of other people are thinking about following a similar path to us and starting to travel as new grad therapists. So we did start in 2015, starting out as new grad PTs, and we have not stopped traveling since. So as Jared alluded to, we are now working only part-time. We're only working about half the year while traveling for fun and taking additional time off the rest of the year to do other things. So a lot of people want to know how it is that we're able to do that, and so that's what we want to talk about tonight, are some of the financial aspects and methods that we've gone about in order to be able to work only part-time or more or less just half the year while still earning enough income to survive on and to have a wonderful lifestyle still. So we're going to go into a little bit of detail of that tonight on our topic. But I also want to tell you guys a little bit about us as well. Some of you guys might have been following our story on Facebook and on Instagram. So we went out of the country for part of the year. So far this year, we've actually only worked one travel therapy contract. So we've actually only worked 3 months. And Jared worked a little less than 3 months, about 10 weeks. And I worked about 12 weeks this year. So far we've taken one travel therapy contract this year. And then we went out of the country in May to Europe. So we were in Europe for 15 weeks. And then we actually just got back from Europe about a month ago. Not quite a month ago. A little over 3 weeks ago, and then we were only home for a few days, and then we immediately took off on a road trip from our home state of Virginia to Las Vegas. So we were in Las Vegas for a travel healthcare conference, the Travelers Conference. So we did 15 weeks in Europe, and then we were on the road going on a cross-country road trip for 3 weeks straight, and then we just got back from that on Thursday. Yeah, Thursday we got back from our road trip. And then immediately after that, on Saturday, we had a wedding to attend in Norfolk, Virginia, or Virginia Beach, which is also where I went to PT school. So we went to a wedding. And then today we spoke, we gave a presentation at my alma mater at Old Dominion University, which actually I have my ODU shirt on right now. We did a presentation on travel therapy and finances this morning at Old Dominion, which was amazing. So we got to meet some of the DPT students there and see some of my old professors and my classmates, a couple of my classmates that are adjunct teaching there. So it has just been a whirlwind ever since May. It has been go, 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 go. We haven't worked as PTs, but we've been doing all kinds of stuff, and of course still working on the blogs and the websites and producing content.
And that presentation we gave today is very similar to the one we're going to be giving at National Student Conclave in about 5 or 6 weeks. So it was a really good practice run. Go over some of that content. We definitely found some things that we can adjust, make better. So hopefully some of you guys will be at National Student Conclave this year and can come to our presentation there.
Yeah, so if we have any students tuning in, if you guys are watching and anybody's planning on going to the National Student Conclave, please leave us a comment and let us know. It's this year from October 31st, so the end of next month, October 31st through November 2nd in Albuquerque. New Mexico, and we will be giving a presentation on travel healthcare or travel physical therapy and finances, which we know a little bit about. That's definitely an area that we've done a lot of research on and have a lot of personal experience with. So if you guys are going to NSC, we'd love to hear from you. I do see that quite a few people are on live right now. If you guys would say hi in the comments, student, clinician, whoever you are, we'd love to hear from you. Alex says that they'll see us at NSC. That's great, Alex.
That's awesome.
And I see Craig is on. Hi, Craig. And if anybody else is on, if you would just say hi in the comments and let us know you're watching, we'd love to hear from you.
All right, so talking about the topic tonight, when we first started traveling, our first few years, we really wanted to work a lot and save a lot. And we found, after talking to some of our classmates when we first graduated, that our take-home pay, in some cases, was actually double what some of our classmates were. So that got us thinking, if we can make that much money, we can save a lot up front, then how can we scale back our work to have more flexibility in our life? And basically the way we did that is to start taking less contracts per year. So we saved a lot up front, and now we're able to scale back to working probably 2 contracts a year. We're even starting to think about working less than 2 contracts a year, like 1 contract a year, but 2 contracts per year, and we can still make about the same as what a permanent outpatient therapist would make in our area, our hometown. So I think that's a really awesome lifestyle move, because you might have paid time off and things like that with a permanent job, but as a travel therapist, if we work 6 months straight, make the same amount as we would in 12 months, and then we take that extra 6 months to either work on hobbies or travel or learn new skills, take classes. I mean, the opportunities are endless if you have 6 whole months free per year. So we really liked the ability to be able to have that flexibility, even if that means not making potentially as much as we could if we worked the whole year as a travel therapist.
Yeah, so there's just, like Joe had said, an endless number of possibilities here. And as we're kind of talking about this and you guys are listening, some of you guys are going to sit here and think like, wow, that sounds amazing. And then others of you are going to say, that sounds stupid. Why would I do that? Other people really value having consistency in a permanent position, and we get that. And then other people really value having more consistent work. Maybe they don't want to take 6 whole months off. Maybe their skills would get rusty. And we get that, but we're just sort of highlighting that there is this flexibility that does exist, and you could set that up however you wanted to. And I would say it's much more common for travel therapists to maybe work a contract and then take a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month off, and then work another contract, and then maybe take a couple of weeks off, work another contract. It's less common for people to do the craziness that we've done of taking like 6 whole months off in a row. But we want to let you know that craziness is possible if you want it.
And it should be noted too that if you wanted to do 3 months on, 1 month off, 3 months on, 1 month off, that's basically 3 contracts per year, and you'd have an entire month in between each contract, which is a lot of vacation time, probably more than enough for a lot of people. If you don't want to take these extended trips out of the country like we do, then having a month off between each contract would be great, and you would still, in those 3 contracts, likely make at least 1.25 times as much to 1.5 times as much as you would as a permanent therapist and working a whole year.
Yeah. I see Amy's on. Hi, Amy. And Mike is on as well. And Mike's getting ready, I think, to start travel therapy. So thanks for joining us, Mike. We want to go through some numbers, because there's a lot of people that don't really understand how this works. How is it possible you can earn that much? How does it work with this whole gross pay versus net pay? So we want to highlight some numbers for you guys. And sometimes this isn't very easy to deliver in a video format, so we'll go over it. But at the end of the video, Jared's going to share the link to the article that he wrote that really outlines this in written format, which I think is easier for you guys to see for numerical purposes.
Yeah, there's 2 articles I wrote, one a couple years ago and one just probably last year sometime that lay out the numbers pretty well. But we'll try to talk through it. We'll talk about some of the ways that being a travel therapist obviously benefits you in terms of making more money, but it also benefits you in terms of paying less in taxes, which is indirectly also leads to more money in your pocket.
Yeah.
So as a travel therapist, just a quick background about travel therapy pay. We don't ever recommend that people take less than about $1,500 per week after taxes. So that's take-home pay, net pay. Mm-hmm. And comparing that to a permanent salary, if you were making about $68,000 a year as a permanent therapist, your take-home pay there would be about $980. It would be somewhere a little bit less than $1,000 per week take-home. So you can see right there that that's a pretty big difference in the weekly take-home amount as a traveler compared to a permanent therapist. But that 1,500 number is it's a little on the low end. So ideally, most of our contracts have been somewhere between like $1,650 and $1,800 a week after taxes. So that's great. If you're working on the West Coast, you can even push that up into the $2,000 a week range. And if you're willing to work home health on the West Coast, you can go even higher than that. So if you compare a home health contract in California making $2,100 a week after taxes compared to a permanent salary job making $68,000 a year where you're taking home $980, you're already making double what that permanent therapist is making. And at least in our area, it depends. This is highly dependent on where you are in the country. But in our area, most outpatient clinics only pay somewhere around $65,000 a year for new grads. So it's very easy to take travel contracts and make double that amount, which means that either you can make double that over the entire course of the year, or you can work half the year and make the same amount, which is wonderful.
Right. So going through some numbers here, we want to give a couple examples. So if you guys are new to the travel therapy world and new to the way that travel therapy pay works, this whole thing might sound pretty confusing. And so we would recommend that you guys do a little research and read one of our articles just breaking down the basics of how the pay works, because we're going to throw out some numbers here. So when we're talking about this like $1,500 to $2,000 a week after taxes, that really means after taxes are taken out really in your bank account every week. Whereas salaried numbers like 68,000 or 75,000 salary, those are gross numbers. Those are talked about before taxes. So what Jared's saying, where you really only get about $900 to $1,000 in your bank account every week, if you were paid weekly as a permanent therapist, typically you're paid bi-weekly, so maybe it's closer to 2,000 bi-weekly. Those are really your after-tax numbers that you're seeing. So we want to give an example here.
So using probably our average amount that we've made working on the East Coast, we've taken almost all of our jobs on the East Coast, which pays a little bit lower. So remember that these numbers will be quite a bit higher if you're willing to go to California and work out there. But around $1,700 a week after taxes is pretty close to the average that we've made. And if you took that $1,700 a week after taxes and multiply that by 2 contracts, which would be 26 weeks, that is about $44,000 a year after taxes. And that's roughly equivalent to a salary position making somewhere between $60,000 to $62,000 a year. But here's one interesting thing about travel therapy pay, and if you only work 2 contracts, the taxable pay is normally only about $20 an hour. So $20 an hour working 40 hours a week is $800 a week. So when you multiply that by 26 weeks, you end up with a taxable pay for the whole year of only somewhere in the $20,000 range. Well, the great thing about being in that range is that if you make, for 2019, I believe it's less than $19,500. So if your taxable pay, say, is $21,000 a year, and then you contribute $1,500 of that to a 401k, which drops your pay down below $19,500, you're basically paying $0 in federal taxes. And the reason for that is the saver's credit. So the first $12,000 of your taxable pay is already taxed at 0 because of the standard deduction that is in our tax code. And then, in addition to that, up to that $19,500, you get a tax credit of up to $1,000 that applies to offset your tax liability. So if you're making a taxable income of around $19,500 a year, you're paying $0 in federal taxes, which would mean that the only taxes you're actually paying are state taxes and FICA taxes. So for Virginia, where we're from, that would mean that your tax rate in total is only going to be about 12 to 13%. And when recruiters give you these take-home pay numbers, they almost always use an assumption of 25% tax rate. Well, if you're only working 2 contracts and you're only actually paying 12% in taxes on that money, the take-home amount they quote you is actually going to be significantly less than actually what you're going to take home or what you're going to make per week once taxes are accounted for, since the tax rate is so much lower.
Yeah.
So they might quote you $1,700 a week, but once you factor in that you're only paying about 12 to 13% in actual taxes on that money, you might be making closer to $1,760 or $1,770 maybe even close to $1,800 a week after taxes.
Yeah, so this is something people never talk about, because when you talk to the recruiters, you want to get a rough idea of how much you're going to make. And when we all compare pay, you know, you're asking your friends who are travel therapists, you're reading our articles, you're asking other people, they're all talking about their weekly take home quoted to them by the travel company, and they're basing it on you working a full year. So they're basing your taxes on you working a full year. So they're going to subtract out or deduct taxes on your weekly paychecks. But at the end of the year, when you go to file your taxes, you're going to actually get a significant refund if you only worked 6 months that year, because in the eyes of the IRS, you know, you only made a low amount of a taxable income. So you're actually going to get taxed less on working only 6 months that year instead of 12 months.
And that's really the key, is that with that lower taxable rate, your tax rate is less than what they're anticipating and what you're being quoted. So even if you're, you know, being quoted a number, 1,700, in reality, you'd add probably another 12% of that taxable pay back in to really account for what you'd make if you're only working 6 months a year.
Yeah, and
hopefully that makes sense. If that doesn't make any sense, let me know, because this is something that I've done a lot of research and writing about. So I feel like it makes sense, but maybe it doesn't.
It's complicated, and if you don't know a lot about taxes, which I'm not super intelligent when it comes to the taxes, he's had to explain this to me no less than 100 times for me to even just get the basics of it. But it really makes sense if you look at the way the tax brackets work, and thinking about the fact that you're making, you know, only part of your money's taxable and part of it's not. I see that a bunch of you guys are on. Oh, I did something crazy. I spun us around. Did we just go sideways, guys? Let's see if I can fix it somehow. I was just trying to read the comments. So, can you guys tell us if we're now sideways? Because I was just trying to read the comments and now things are crazy. So I was going to say hi to Mike and Caroline and Laura and Ryan. Hello, everyone. Maddie says that's super helpful. Hi, Maddie. Craig has a question. Craig wants to know, do you guys file together or separate, and does that matter? So Craig, we are not married, and so we file separately. We are both single, file single, and that way, single and zero, or whatever it might be, or single and one, when we file our taxes. So, Jack, so are we still...
No, we're good, because you can tell that our faces are sideways. So for some reason, our screen is flipped, but I guess
our screen is flipped, so we're having technological
guys.
difficulties, but hopefully you can still see us. Okay, so Maddie says, does that deduction apply for 9 months as well, or just 6 months? So Maddie, it's not how many months you work, it's how much taxable income you earn.
Yeah, so I'll link to an article. So I wrote an article that is titled, like, paying $0 in federal taxes and paying $0 in student loan payments. And that's based on working a full 48 weeks a year as a traveler. And the way that you would go about that is you're trying to reduce your taxable income down to about that $20,000 a year range, which in order to do that, if you're working the entire year, would be to contribute to a 401k or a traditional IRA. And that drops your taxable income down. But if you're only working 2 contracts a year, then you don't need to contribute a bunch of money to a 401k, because your taxable income is already going to be low.
Yeah.
So
it basically just depends on how much money you earn that year. So when you get paid as a traveler, only part of your money is taxed. So it looks like you made $20 an hour times only 40 hours times only 26 weeks if you worked 6 months. So then if you worked 9 months in your example, your taxable income would be higher, but still not quite as high as if you worked a full year, and certainly nowhere near quite as high as if you worked a full year as a permanent therapist. Because as we know, if you're a permanent PT or OT or speech therapist, all your money is taxed. So you really make like $45 or $50 an hour as a permanent therapist. So your tax
maybe not
bracket
that much, but
is a lot higher.
So Craig, no, we don't file together, like Whitney said. If we did file together, it wouldn't make a huge difference, though, because we each get the $12,000 standard deduction, and that saver's credit amount would be higher. So if we filed together, we both only work 2 contracts per year, we still would probably, we would still be making significantly more, paying a lot less in taxes, because basically everything's doubled in that scenario.
Yeah. So this stuff's kind of interesting, and it's kind of like a loophole that a lot of people just don't know about or don't talk about, because the majority of people, they just work the whole year and they just file their taxes and they just don't pay that much attention. They just fill in the boxes and they listen to what their recruiter says. But Jared has delved a lot deeper into all the nuances of how the taxes work and all this. So it's kind of interesting to think, like, not only do you make more, but you keep more because you're taking out less in taxes. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, and not only that, but the reason it also is not talked about is because most people in the world have permanent jobs where all their pay is taxed, and you can't do these kind of things.
Yeah, but even in the travel therapy world.
Yeah, even in the travel therapy world, people don't talk about it. And that's just because, I mean, taxes are complicated. Most people don't spend time learning about taxes, but it's something that I enjoy, which is weird. But I like to learn about taxes, and I like to learn about tax brackets and how things work. And I like to file things on my own. So, I've spent time learning about this. So, yeah, anyway, that $20,000 range is a great place to be to basically completely minimize your federal tax burden if that's your goal. So whether that's contributing to 401k to reduce the income if you're working the full year, or just working 2 contracts and keeping it around that range, that'll keep a lot more money in your pocket, which means that you can probably work 2 contracts and make about the equivalent of a full-time salary.
Yeah, so I mean, like Jared said earlier, it's really neat that we have the opportunity as travel therapists to make so much more. So if your goal is to make as much money as possible, like we did for the first 3 years, we worked back to back to back contracts. We took almost no time off. So we probably worked close to like 50 weeks out of the year, still allowing a little bit of time to go back home to our tax home, to meet our tax home requirements and all that on the weekends and during the holidays. But we just saved. But now that we're in a decent financial situation, have a good savings built up, and we're like, we can easily live on what you get paid for 2 travel contracts a year. And we're really more about having that lifestyle flexibility and the opportunities to just do our own thing, travel for fun, go see family, just pursue other interests. And that lifestyle flexibility is something that not very many people have that have permanent jobs. So we're in a very unique situation.
All right, let's answer a little bit of these, or some of these questions.
Yeah.
If you guys are getting value, I know there's a lot of people in here. If you guys are getting value from this, if you could please like the video so more people see it, that would be really great.
Give us a little thumbs up or a heart at the bottom. We would appreciate it.
So Maddie is asking about 401k matching, and is that common? Yes, it's common. The thing that you have to be careful with about 401k matching and travel is that a lot of them have vesting periods, which means that if you don't work a certain amount of time with them, that you don't keep that match. They take it back, basically. So, and this depends on the company. So some it'll be you have to work 3 years with them to keep the match. So you get it right away, but to keep it, you need to work 3 years. Some will have it vested right away, meaning that if you leave that company, you keep the match. So matching is common, but you have to be careful about the vesting schedule that each company has.
Okay, so we've got a few other questions coming in. If you guys have more questions, whether it's specifically about this or just travel therapy in general, we'd be happy to answer them. We do have a couple more things we're going to talk about in terms of this topic, but we'll answer your questions. So Craig wants to know, Craig says, that helps, thanks. My wife is a nurse and we would be traveling together. That's awesome, Craig.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Alex says, Alex has kind of an unrelated question, wants to know, do you have a guide about the frequent moving? So we don't have necessarily a guide. We do have some articles about that, and you can get a lot of feedback from different travelers on how they've gone about doing that. We have so far in this video pumped up the value of the flexibility and the pay. There are some caveats to that with travel. One of those is having to move frequently. Another caveat is that you might have higher expenses, so you do have to take that into account in your whole budget as a big picture. But yeah, moving is one of the hassles. A lot of people do short-term housing. We did an RV for a while. Our best advice is pack light. You don't need as much as you think you need.
Every single time you go on an assignment, you'll find out that there's stuff that you didn't use, and then you'll pack less next time, and you'll still find there's stuff you didn't use.
Yeah.
So pack less than you think that you're going to need is the most important thing.
And there's also other ways to offset the hassle of moving a lot. So for our first 3 years, because our primary goal was to work and save as much as possible, we actually only worked within driving distance from our home in Virginia. So we only worked on the East Coast. Sometimes it was within the state of Virginia or the neighboring state of North Carolina. Once for 6 months we went up to Massachusetts. So every move that we made was a relative 1 to 2 day drive, and we were able to pack everything in our cars.
All right, so Travis is asking about 401ks. What 401k systems do y'all go through, the recruiting companies or something else? So you can only have a 401k through your employer if you're a W-2 employee, which most travelers are going to be. If you did like independent contracting where you're a 1099 employee, then you could open your own 401k. But for most of us traveling, the travel company is going to be your only choice as far as 401k goes. So we go through the company. We try to our best to max out our 401k each year, at least when we are working the full year. Now that we're only working part of the year, it's definitely not as important because our taxes are already low to begin with. But yeah, so we try to max out our 401k. We also use a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA depending on the year and what our tax amount is. So you can use both of those things. So 401k and then also a traditional or a Roth IRA, you can contribute to both of those. So we use both, and then when we leave a company, we'll roll our 401k into a IRA so that we can manage it ourselves and not have that with the company.
Okay, and Travis says he's asking because as a couple, we have multiple companies and we don't want to dive into the company's 401k.
Yeah, so that's not a big deal. I wrote an article about this as well, actually, because a lot of people are nervous about, if you switch companies, you don't want to have money locked up there. But that's not really a concern because as soon as you leave, you can roll that money over. Mm-hmm. So that's what we'd recommend. Don't feel like you're locked into one company just because of the 401k.
Yeah.
Contribute when you leave, roll it over, and then start with the new company.
And it's actually a relatively easy process. It's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it is easy.
Now, the only caveat there is some companies don't let you contribute right away. So that can be frustrating if you are switching between companies for different jobs, which is beneficial because of the job opportunities and options. But if they don't let you contribute until you've already been with the company for a certain period of time, that can be a negative. So we recommend you try to find a company that allows you to contribute immediately on your first contract so you can go ahead and start getting those benefits right out of the gate. And if you have questions, Travis, we have a couple companies we know of that we've worked with that do allow you to contribute right away. They don't match right away, but they contribute right away, which is the main thing. Like Jared said, the match is really sometimes just to lure you in. It's really not that beneficial.
Yeah, and remember that this whole thing we're talking about with working half the year, making a full-time salary, that's based on the assumption that you're getting paid well as a traveler. So make sure you're not going with these like very low-paying companies that we get people contact us all the time that are getting these very low offers, especially as new grad PTs. So be careful about that. If you guys want some good companies that we believe in, that we have worked with over the years, that we communicate with, you can just type recruiter in the comments and we'll send you some recommendations.
Yeah.
But make sure that you're working with a solid company and don't just go with the first company that contacts you.
Yep. Travis had another follow-up question. Travis says, can you roll into your already set up Roth account?
So Roth and traditional are different. 401k that you contribute to through your company is almost always going to be traditional. I don't know of any travel companies that offer a Roth 401k. So when you roll over your 401k, you're going to roll that into a traditional IRA. If you don't, then you're going to have to pay taxes on that money like it's earned income, because going from a traditional 401k to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. So you basically pay taxes on your income for that year, but also that rollover. So you want to be very careful about that. You would roll it over into a traditional IRA. If you wanted to roll it into a Roth and pay the taxes, you could, but that's probably not what you want to do.
Okay. Melody has a follow-up question about, you guys are hitting it hard on the retirement savings. We got a lot of financially savvy people on tonight. I like that. So Melody wants to know, so it makes sense to have a Roth IRA or a traditional until you find a solid and continuous company to work for? Maybe. So it depends, Melody. So for our first 3 years, we were really heavily investing. So we were actually maxing out both our company 401k and our traditional IRAs. So we wanted to exceed the amount that you could put it, which is like $18,000 in the 401k, and we also wanted to max out the IRA. So it depends on how much money you have expendable income to put aside to contribute. So if you only have enough that you want to contribute to the traditional, which is what, $6,000?
That's $6,000. And
or
Melody, I can send you an article on the 401k. And it really depends on how much you plan to invest for retirement. If it's more than $6,000, then you probably want to utilize the company 401k. Mm-hmm. If it's less than that, then just skip it, because usually the match is nice, but for a lot of travel companies, especially if they have a long vesting period, it's not going to mean a lot to you, that match. So in that case, it's probably better to just go with your IRA, just invest in there. Mm-hmm. But I can send you an article I wrote.
Yeah, so good questions, guys. So a little off topic, but super good questions. These are definitely a lot of things that we've had to think about, because now, like I said, we were heavily investing in our accounts, in our traditional IRA, and our 401k, and our health savings accounts, and even some brokerage accounts of our own for our first 3 years. And then so this year, I was so used to that, and Jared's not a licensed financial advisor, but he is my personal financial advisor. So disclaimer, we're not licensed financial advisors, but he does help me. And so I'm like, okay, so, on this contract that we worked this year, like, am I going to go ahead and, set aside my money to go in my 401k? And he's like, no, we're not doing 401k right now because we're only making this amount and it doesn't, we don't need to decrease our taxable anymore. And all that money that you're going to make for the one contract this year, we actually need.
Yeah.
So we don't want to shovel it all aside for retirement.
Yeah, and if you're, like I mentioned, if you're in that $20,000 range, your taxable income is around $20,000, you don't want to contribute a lot of money to a 401k because you're already getting taxed 0% on that money. If you're having that savers credit offset your tax burden, then you're getting taxed 0%. So it doesn't make any sense to put money in a pre-tax account when you're not paying taxes on it to start with, right? So in that scenario, you'd much rather put money into a Roth IRA if you want to put it in a retirement account.
Yeah, but not always. It's not always one of these black and white things, because a lot of people are just like, Roth, good, okay, but it's not always that way. Sometimes the traditional makes more sense. So again, kind of off topic, guys, but really good questions, and I'm really glad that there's more and more people joining in and asking these questions, because even though we are healthcare providers, we should still be financially savvy. And that's one big thing, like we talked about so much today at our talk at my school that we gave today, was about finance and just setting yourself up for financial success, because we don't all want to work until we're 100 at 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. We want to have other experiences and have lifestyle flexibility. So
all right, so we should also mention, obviously we are biased towards travel because that's all we've ever done. We started as new grads, we've worked nonstop as travelers, so we're biased that direction. But if you wanted to also do something similar, work half the year and make a full-time salary, you can definitely do that with home health. And we've talked to several people now that make as much, or some cases more than us, working home health as we do as travelers. And that's from working PRN jobs with high pay rates and working a lot of hours. So if you're willing to work like in a rural area with, that's in pretty high need of PTs, and you can work 40 to 50 hours a week and just save all that money for 6 months, with PRN, you have a lot of flexibility. So you could easily put a lot of money in, make 60 or 70,000 in 6 months, and then take the rest of the year off. And most people, obviously, like I said, they don't choose to do that. They would rather work the full year and make $120,000, $130,000. But if you wanted that flexibility to be able to travel or work on hobbies or other things, then you could also do it that way.
And it would really depend on the market availability in your area. Maybe there's not a company that would be willing to only hire you for part of the year. Maybe they need that commitment of you year round. But we're just letting you know there are some options. Really the moral of this is that you have choices. You don't have to do the traditional 52 weeks a year, 40 hours a week. You have options. You can work PRN, you can work part-time, you can have a couple different PRN jobs that are higher paying, you can take travel contracts. There's a lot of different ways that you can earn more money and work less hours.
Yes.
So that is the sum of our talk tonight. Do you guys have more questions for us about pay, about travel therapy, about being financially savvy, anything like that? If you have more questions, please leave them in the comments.
Yeah, and one more caveat there is, as a traveler, you do have to keep in mind, because I know there's a lot of people watching, some of you guys are probably not that familiar with travel. You have to keep in mind that your expenses are going to be a little bit higher as a traveler. And the reason for that is because you have to maintain a tax home, which you guys may or may not know about. But that's basically your permanent residence. It's the area you go back to between contracts. And pretty much most people that are traveling that are taking tax-free stipends are maintaining a tax home, which means they have duplicate expenses. So you might be making the same amount as a full-time therapist working only 6 months a year, but you're going to have a little bit higher expenses than you might have as a full-time therapist. So keeping that in mind is important. The more you can minimize those expenses, the better. So if you can rent rooms at home instead of renting an entire apartment or having a house, that saves you a lot of money, of course. So how much higher your expenses will be very individual, and it depends on your situation. But yeah, you do have to keep in mind that your expenses will probably be a little bit higher.
Yeah, and that's what we get a lot of. There's a lot of naysayers out there that will argue and say, well, you don't even make that much more. You make that much more as a travel therapist, but you don't keep that much more as a travel therapist because your expenses are high. But every person's situation is very different, and if your primary goal is to have the most lifestyle flexibility and keep as much income as possible, you need to keep your expenses low like we have. We've been extremely frugal throughout our traveling years. We rent a room in a house as our tax home, and then when we travel for work, we lived in the camper for a while, and then we also rented furnished apartments on Craigslist, and we keep our expenses very low. We choose to take jobs in lower cost of living areas. If it is your goal and dream and aspiration to work in San Francisco, you are not going to pay low rent. You are going to pay really high rent. You're also going to get a really high paycheck, but you're going to have a big offset there with your expenses. So it depends on what your goal is in life, but there are ways that you can earn a buttload of money and save a lot of it if you continue to live frugally, keep your expenses low.
Yep. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. Hopefully that's helpful to you guys. If it was helpful, please like the video, leave us a comment, let us know. That'd be awesome. If you guys are interested in traveling, comment recruiters and in the comments below, and we'll send you some recommendations for companies that we like, recruiters that we trust.
I see Travis asked for recruiters. So Travis, I'll send you a message after the video. If you do want recruiter recommendations, what I'll usually do is I'll send you a message and we'll chat a little bit about what it is you guys are looking for, because there's not one company. Like, people ask us all the time, which travel company should you work with? There's not one company for everybody. There's not one recruiter for everybody. So we like to have a conversation with you guys. Look at what you're looking for, what area of the country you're trying to go, what's the most important thing to you, what your personality is like, to find out which recruiters and which companies might work well for you. So we can definitely help you guys with that. Alex had another question. Can you rent out your home while traveling and still consider that your tax home? Really good question.
That is a very good question, and the answer with everything, it depends. If you rent out the entire house for the full year, then no, that would not count as a tax home. And also, I should mention that I'm not a CPA. This is just my understanding. But if you rented out your whole house except for one bedroom that you kept for yourself, and in the lease you said, this is like my room that I'll come back to, and the rest of the house is the renter's room or the renter's area, and you had that room open to yourself and it was free for you to come back to, then yes, that would count. The other thing is you could rent out the entire house but only for part of the year. So things like Airbnb would work. So say you rented out the house only 20 days a month, and then the other 10 days a month it was open for you to come back, then that would still count as your tax home. And those are great ways to offset some of that cost if you're able to do that. The only problems with that sometimes is that if you don't have somebody in the area that you trust to help you manage that rental property, it can be tough. So yeah, that's a very good option. If you can set that up, that's wonderful.
Yeah. We had a couple other questions come through. So Travis says, duplicating expenses can be gifted back to you via payment of student loans. Found this out from a travel tax. Okay, that's good information.
So that's wonderful. If you are renting from your parents and your parents are willing to do that for you, then that is great. Or family member or whatever. Not everybody's in that situation, of course, but if you are, then that is a really, really good situation to be in.
And what he mentioned, travel tax, that's a great resource for you guys that are kind of new to this and you have questions about the tax home or questions about managing your taxes, managing your finances. There's a CPA that works specifically with travel healthcare providers, and you can visit them at their website, traveltax.com, and they do phone consultations if you guys have specific questions about your situation. Because again, we're just kind of giving you guys some general information, what we've learned from our reading and our research. But if you have very specific questions about, I live here and I need to know about this and I need to know about this, it's very highly recommended that you speak to a tax professional and tell them the nuances of your own situation, because we can't tell you that. We don't know.
Yeah, and a lot of times they'll do free consultations, which is great. So reach out, talk to them, mention what your situation is, and hopefully they can help you out.
Okay. Craig says, travel or no travel, live frugally. To get ahead early is key. Yeah, absolutely. We can't reiterate that enough.
So part of our presentation today was talking about compound interest and how that adds up if you invest the money that you make as a traveler for the first few years compared to going straight into a permanent job, and how that adds up over time. And it is ridiculous how much of a difference saving early and compounding interest in the market makes.
Yeah, and I don't know who's on that needs to hear this, but public service announcement, don't buy a new car. Yeah. When you get out of school, don't buy a new car. Buy a used car, continue to live frugally, pay off your loans, start investing for your future, and you guys will come out ahead regardless of whether you choose a permanent position or a travel position. So thank you guys so much for your engagement tonight. We're so happy that you joined on. If you guys have more questions, you can feel free to leave comments we'll check back at the video. Even if you're watching this later on the replay, you can leave us a comment. You can also send us a private message at Travel Therapy Mentor on our Facebook page. If you guys have more questions, we have a lot of information on our website as well that can help you different articles.
Yeah, and like we mentioned, as soon as this video is over, I'll go back in and put some links to those articles if you guys want to see it like actually written out on paper with like the tax credits and all that stuff. So
yeah,
sometimes that helps.
And if you guys have any friends that are interested in travel therapy that might find this video beneficial, we'd love if you would just tag them in the comments so that more people can see the video as well.
Yep, thanks for watching. We'll be back next Sunday. We do these videos every week, so next Sunday evening, we'll be talking about something else travel therapy related.
Yep.
If you guys have anything specifically you want to hear about, feel free to send us a message.
Okay, guys, thank you. Have a good night.
Yep, see you later.